Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, third chapter, text number 16. So we can read the verse first. Vaiyasakich cha Bhagavan Vasudeva Parayana Urugaya Gunodaraha Satam Shurhi Samagame. Once more. Vaiyasakich Bhagavan Vasudeva Parayana Urugaya Gunodaraha Satam Shurhi Samagame. The word-to-word meanings. Vaiyasakhi, the son of Vasudeva. Cha, also. Bhagwan, full in transcendental knowledge. Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. Parayana, attached to. Urugaya, of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers. Guna, Udara, great qualities. Satam, of the devotees. Shu, must have been. He, as a matter of fact. Samagame, by the presence of. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Sukadev Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, was also full in transcendental knowledge and was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, son of Vasudeva. So there must have been discussion of Lord Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers and in the company of great devotees. Purport. The word Satam is very important in this verse. Satam means the pure devotees who have no other desire than to serve the Lord. Only in the association of such devotees are the transcendental glories of Lord Krishna properly discussed. It is said by the Lord that his topics are all full of spiritual significance. And once one properly hears about him in the association of Satam, certainly one senses the great potency and so automatically attains to the devotional stage of life. As already described, Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee of the Lord from his very birth, and so was Sukadev Goswami. Both of them were on the same level, although it appeared that Maharaj Parikshit was a great king accustomed to royal facilities, whereas Sukadev Goswami was a typical renouncer of the world, so much so that he did not even put a cloth on his body. Superficially, Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami might seem to be opposites, but basically they were both unalloyed, pure devotees of the Lord. When such devotees are assembled together, there can be no topics save discussions of the glories of the Lord or Bhakti Yoga. In the Bhagavad-Gita also, when there were talks between the Lord and his devotee Arjun, there could not be any other topic other than Bhakti Yoga, however the mundane scholars may speculate on it their own ways. The use of the word cha after Vyavasakhi suggests, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, that both Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit were of the same category, settled long before, although one was playing the part of the master and the other the disciple. Since Lord Krishna is the center of the topics, the word Vasudeva Parayana, or devotee of Vasudeva, suggests devotee of Lord Krishna, a common aim. Although there were many others who assembled at the place where Maharaj Parikshit was fasting, the natural conclusion is that there was no other topic other than the glorification of Lord Krishna, because the principal speaker was Sukadev Goswami and the chief audience was Maharaj Parikshit. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, as it was spoken and heard by two principal devotees of the Lord, is only for the glorification of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So it's a very nice purport. So let's get started. Om Ajnanam Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in this verse, it describes the pure devotees of the Lord. Sukadev Goswami, who is the son of Vyasadeva, he's also full of transcendental knowledge and a great devotee of Lord Krishna. And so there must have been discussion of Lord Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers and in the company of great devotees. So here we find that Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj are together, and naturally when they come together, then the only purpose why they come together is because they want to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So I was thinking is that why Lord Krishna? And as we see that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is clearly mentioned that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, that's what we follow. That is, we follow Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is clearly mentioned that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if we connect and look at Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, third chapter, 28th verse, we can read it. It's a very beautiful and it's a key verse and connects with the verse today because it deals with the glorification of Lord Krishna. Ete chamsha kala pumsha Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam Indrayi Vyakulam Lokam Mridyanti Yuge Yuge. So the translation of that verse is, all the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appeared on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by atheists. And the Lord incarnates to protect the theists. So here it is clearly mentioned that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is why whenever pure devotees, they come together, they just want to go for the topmost, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is why they glorify Lord Krishna. And we also have one or two verses in, actually the whole of Bhagavad-Gita is regarding the supremacy of Lord Krishna. I have one or two verses. Bhagavad-Gita 10.18, which talks about, which the translation is, O Janardhan, again, please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I'm never satiated in hearing about you. For the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. So if we look at it, when we look at the purport of this verse, it says that as far as Krishna Katha goes, it's amritam, or it's nectar. That is, any narration or statement concerning Krishna is just like nectar. So like we have, and also the purport describes that there are so many stories that we have, like storybooks and fiction and history, and there's so much of literature that is out there. But once you come to the Hari Katha, there's no literature that can beat that, because once you come to that platform, somehow everything else just pales in comparison. And all your, you're just so attracted to Hari Katha that all the mundane, it's good to know even what's going on in the world and the articles and all, but somehow everything pales in comparison with hearing about Krishna. And, the purport also goes on to say that the Puranas are history of bygone eras that relate to the pastimes of various incarnations of this Lord. In this way, the reading matter remains forever fresh, despite repeated readings. So what the point is, that Krishna Katha is Amritam, or nectar. And once you start relishing it, then you realize that, nothing can compare to the beauty of Krishna Katha. And another verse that I had was Bhagavad Gita 11.36, where Arjuna says, O master of the senses, the world becomes joyful upon hearing your name, and thus everyone becomes attached to you. Although the perfected beings offer you their respective homage, the demons are afraid and they flee here and there. All this is rightly done. And the holy name of Krishna makes everyone very joyful and enlightened. And it is said that even when the battle of Kurukshetra was being concluded, many demigods, siddhas, and intelligence of the higher planets were there, because they were all observing, because Krishna was there. And so that is what the potency of the, of Krishna is, his holy name is. And that is why we see that Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami, who were pure devotees of the Lord, they were discussing about the glories of Krishna. And if we see, Sukadev Goswami himself was such an elevated devotee, and that in Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 12th chapter and 44th verse, it is described what a great, the depth of his ecstatic devotion to Lord Krishna is described. When Parikshit Maharaj is inquiring about him regarding the events following Krishna's killing of Aghasura. And so Suta Goswami is saying, O Shaunaka, greatest of saints and devotees, when Maharaj Parikshit inquired from Sukadev Goswami in this way, Sukadev Goswami, immediately remembering subject matters about Krishna within the core of his heart, externally lost contact with the action of his senses. Thereafter, with great difficulty, he revived his external sensory perception and began to speak to Maharaj Parikshit about Krishna Katha. So he just went into a state of ecstasy, which is, which pure devotees sometimes, do when they just, start thinking about Krishna. And that is how elevated devotee, that is how much elevated devotee he was. And as far as Parikshit Maharaj was concerned, he was always an elevated devotee. Like in the previous chapters, we've seen how even from his childhood, he was very much attracted to Lord Krishna. And even though he had only 7 days to live, he was not really fearing the the snake bite that he was going to get, and the death, impending death that was going to come upon him. And instead he was, very enthusiastically going along, discussing Krishna Katha with everyone. So that is why, like, we see both these devotees are so elevated. And it is very interesting because Prabhupada, in his purport, he highlights this point that both of them were on the same level, although it appears that Maharaj Parikshit was a great king, accustomed to royal facilities, whereas Sukadev Goswami was a typical renouncer of the world, so much so that he did not put a cloth on his body. So they seem to be opposite, but basically, so at first glance, they seemed that they were opposite, but they were actually of the same category. It's described later, even though one was a master, playing the part of a master and disciple. So from this, we can see is that just by external appearances, you really cannot make out who's a devotee, who's not a devotee, because one was had been a king, or was a king, and the other was a renounced renunciate. So both of them had totally different external experiences, but both, Prabhupada says, they both were at the same level actually. So how I was thinking that how do we actually make out who is a pure devotee and who is, like, for us, because just by external appearances alone, we cannot really determine who is really a pure devotee. And so I'll take you to, like, Nectar of Instruction, words 6, which talks about what a pure devotee is. And I'll just read the translation. Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee's having born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee, but despite seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. It is exactly like the water of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The Ganges water do not become polluted, and those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. So in this verse, what it's trying to say that just by the fact that a person has been born in a particular family or looks a particular way or is diseased or even infirm, that doesn't matter what they look like. A pure devotee is always above material conception, and they are not to be considered polluted. It's like the Ganges river, which is sacred river, and even in rainy seasons, it may be full of mud at that point of time, but even then it is a sacred river always. So a pure devotee, whatever the appearances and whatever the birth is, whatever form they look like externally, you have to disregard it, because that's really not a criteria for judging a pure devotee at all. And as a matter of fact, there's a very interesting story, which like a pure devotee may not even be like literate, actually can be even illiterate. It's more about the feelings that he has in his heart. So some of you must be knowing this story about Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, he was in South India, and he was in the Ranganath temple, and he was seeing a Brahmin reading a Bhagavad-Gita with great enthusiasm, and everybody was criticizing him, and was saying that, how are you reading the Bhagavad-Gita? Because they knew that he was illiterate, he could not read, but tears were gliding down from his eyes when he was holding the Bhagavad Gita and trying to read it. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at once understood, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is such an was so elevated, he at once understood that this Brahmana was really an elevated devotee. And so he asked him, well, what are you reading? And the Brahman said, I can't read anything because I'm illiterate, and so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said but it appears you're reading. Why are you actually reading it then? And the Brahman told him something, to the fact that, like, my Guru Maharaj asked me to read Bhagavad-Gita, so I am just reading it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, oh, that's very nice. You're carrying out the order of your Guru Maharaj, but it appears you're crying out also. How are you crying if you cannot read? So the Brahman said that because whenever I take this Bhagavad-Gita in my hand, I see the picture of Arjuna asking Krishna to place the chariot in the field, and Krishna is carrying out the order of his devotee as a servant. And I'm thinking, oh, how Krishna is kind, how Krishna is merciful, and so I start crying. So the point of this is, like, he does not even know how to read, but yet, he gets so much, he's so much emotionally into it. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, told him, you are reading Bhagavad Gita. It is not literacy or education or knowing grammar or putting jugglery into words. This is not reading. If one feels what is the purport of Bhagavad Gita, that is reading Bhagavad Gita. So the point is that so many times, we go mechanically and we just kind of go through these a lot of, like, memorization or chanting, also sometimes mechanical chanting. But the thing is, a pure devotee always connects to Lord Krishna, always make sure that the connection is there. It's not so much about just the mechanical reading or mechanical knowing. You actually have to have bhakti. So, we have to get to the point that we can have that bhakti bhav which this Brahman was having. And that is why Lord Chaitanya concluded that, he is a pure devotee of the Lord, even though he did not even know how to read. So I'm just bringing up this point because we are talking about pure devotees in this verse. And so Prabhupada is talking that they are the same level, Sukhdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, even though they are opposites. So a pure devotee comes, like, in many different forms. But one thing that is always there in the pure devotee is that he's always connected to the Lord in a very elevated way, and not like in a just mechanically, going through the process. So, I was thinking, what would be a good way for us, who are at our level, and we are hearing about these exalted devotees, and how can we try to reach that platform? And so I came across a letter, actually, which it's a very nice letter that is written by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. And as you see, this letter was actually written in 1926 to a disciple. And it's very interesting because in this letter, he highlights some things which we need to look for if we want to advance in our devotional life. And this is actually titled, a devotee's goal is Krishna Seva, Vaishnav Seva, and Nam Kirtan. So I'm just going to highlight some important points. I don't think we have time to read word by word. But what he says is one must be optimism, enthusiasm, Krishna, Seva, and service to devotees, and Nam Sankirtan. Means one has always to be optimistic and enthusiastic. One has to fulfill Krishna's desires. And always, he says, engage in hearing, like now how we are doing, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting, and reading the books of Mahajans in the Gaudiya magazines, so there would be no laziness in the matter of accepting the philosophy. Because if you understand the philosophy, then only you can understand, what is being said. Then you can discuss Hari Katha with devotees. And then, when you discuss Hari Katha with devotee, you will realize how fallen you are automatically, because we're always talking about so elevated devotees and, how we can learn from them. And the other thing is always endeavor in the well-being of your subordinates. As by doing so, we will make advancement of our own bhajans. So anyone you feel like is coming new or neophyte, or someone who doesn't know too much, and is enthusiastic about learning, make sure that, you are somehow looking after their well-being, because it's like if you pull somebody up, you yourself get elevated. It's so that's the point over here. And he says that if you do nama sankirtan, then Krishna seva and Vaishnav seva are possible. If you do Vaishnav seva, then Krishna kirtan and Krishna seva are possible. And if you do Krishna seva, then Nam kirtan and Vaishnav seva are possible. And he goes on to add that, whenever we are studying Chaitanya Charitamrita, or we are studying Srimad Bhagavatam in good association, we are doing Krishna Seva and Nam Sankirtan. And when we do deity worship, we are doing all three. And when we are doing Nam Bhajana, we are doing all three. So all of these activities are very, very auspicious. And then he says, go back to your past history and judge what is favorable for your bhajana, like what are the circumstances. Sometimes you will see that some circumstances which you thought were unfavorable for your spiritual growth, as a matter of fact, they actually were favorable, which you realize later. And then lack of service attitude illusions your mind. So always have a service attitude. And then he also says that Krishna's happiness is most important. And if Krishna's happiness is in disappointing us, then that disappointment should be accepted, because ultimately what we have to do is please Krishna, even though it may be disappointment for us in some way or the other. And I like this quote which he says that the restless stream of life flows towards the ocean of death, that is, everyone's life is so short, and whatever we can, we need to do Hari Seva. And then he also says that whatever sufferings I undergo in your service, that is my ultimate pleasure. That whatever sufferings you go through in doing service to Krishna, that becomes like a pleasure. That should become like a pleasure to us, even though it may appear as suffering. And then he says, don't worry about your past anarthas, and they can be subdued by hearing and chanting. And following in the footsteps of the Mahajans is the only bridge to auspiciousness. And I'm going to just read a little bit of thing. Is that, when last paragraph says that, when you're fit, then you start thinking, oh, you're very elevated. And then Krishna then gives you difficulty to put you back in your place, and that is why difficulties come in our life. And he ends it with very interesting thing that when I'm not properly engaged in Krishna's service, I want to quarrel with people. That happens because then you get into political issues. And when you're properly engaged in Krishna's service, then that's enough. But when not, then you have time to enter into all kinds of quarrels. And when I'm engaged in the service of Krishna, people attack me. That too happens. But the thing is, his point is, just strive on and, do what you can. And, ultimately that is what is going to elevate you. So coming back to the verse again, this is a discussion between Sukhdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, who are two elevated devotees. And Prabhupada makes the point that when elevated devotees meet, then all they can discuss is glorification of Lord Krishna, and that is what is like nectar. And then he also makes the point that even though they look like opposites, physically maybe, but in actuality, both of them are very, very advanced and at the same level, and they both relish Krishna Katha. So this is what Prabhupada has written, this very beautiful purport here. And he actually says that these are the two principal devotees engaged in the glorification of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So that's all I had for today. If there are any comments, we can quickly take them. I think we are almost out of time. Okay, if not, then I think we can conclude this session today. Hare Krishna.
It is a nice class. Actually, I need to get into another call, but it's very nice class, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu, for all of you for attending also.
About the external differences doesn't.
Yes, Prabhu.
Very different.
Okay, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mataji.
anybody has any comments, or we can finish?
No, I was just saying the consciousness may be very. I mean, I don't know. I think you are not able to hear. I think I was looking at. Yeah, so the consciousness we will not be able to see until. I mean, we'll not be able to see, right? We cannot just judge based on the external things. In the example of that a devotee in Sri Rangam, and then nicely.
Yeah, it's very difficult to judge who's a pure devotee sometimes just by looking at the externals. Yes, you know, yeah, that's what Prabhupada is saying.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru and Gauranga.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Mataji, sorry I couldn't speak up earlier because I was in another task, so could not.
Okay.
But it was excellent. You brought up so many good points. I like the story you said. You like Mahaprabhu meeting that Brahmana. That was a wonderful story, and even bringing comparison from nectar of devotion and how not to judge a devotee. In fact, how not to judge anyone based on their body, their place of birth, or their status in life, and all those things. And how like the comparison with Ganga, the water of Ganga, whether it's in the rainy season or other. Wonderful, Mataji. Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thanks. Yeah, we tend to judge externally, and that should be stopped with no matter whoever it is, because you never really understand the internals. Externally it's not. Yeah, that's not the right way to judge. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, I think are we done, or we have any other comment?
I think that's all, Mataji.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.